There was no beds available. But when they realized that I was going to help them get into housing, their director came to me and said, Nate, we're going to open up a single bed dedicated to the hot team, not other officers, only the hot team, because you're helping our clients and we want to help you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Julia Lefevre, and around here we talk about leading with clarity, rewiring our mindset, and growing from the inside out. So let me ask you, what if restoring dignity and safety in a city didn't start with punishment, but with partnership? Today's guest, Officer Nate Schwiethale, has built his career proving that that is possible. For over 2 decades with the police department, he has pioneered a new approach to policing that bridges the gap between law enforcement and some of the most vulnerable in our communities. Nate is the founder of the Homeless Outreach Team, a nationally recognized model that has helped more than 1,500 people move from the streets and into housing. His work has been celebrated by the Department of Justice, replicated in cities across the country, and honored with multiple Officer of the Year awards. So, if you have ever wondered how empathy and innovation can transform systems and how leadership can bring real hope to people who feel unseen, Nate's story is one you will want to hear. Nate, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here on Wired to Lead.
Yeah, thanks for the invite. And I just want to do a disclaimer. I'm here representing myself to talk with you and a Safe Night, my consulting company I'm with.
So, tell us, how did you went into the police department wanting to help your community, and how have you been able to do that?
Well, I mean, a little bit of history, I guess, about where I came from and like this journey. I grew up out west, like the Goddard Mays area school district. I always wanted to be a police officer. I graduated high school, went to college, got my criminal justice degree, and then joined the police department in 2001. Back then, I never seen a homeless person, didn't know anything about it. We didn't see them at all on the west side of Wichita.
Yeah.
In fact, I hadn't really even been downtown that much. And went to the academy. They teach you how to make arrests, write reports, de-escalation techniques, that type of thing. And then when you graduate from the academy, they find a area that they need to fill, and that's where you go. You don't get to choose. So I just happened to get selected to go to the downtown area. I didn't know anything about downtown. Never went to the bars or anything like that in college that much. And
Yeah.
what I did learn is most of my 911 calls in the downtown area were homeless related, homeless drinking in the park, jaywalking, panhandling, setting up camps in front of a business. So I end up finding myself throughout the entire day, arresting homeless, taking them to jail. And it's normally for small vagrancy type crimes that they go to jail for an hour and then get a court date and leave, come back to the streets, and then I see them the next day, and then we do it all over again. And I just saw this revolving door of homeless going into the jail and back out on the streets again. And not that I want to brag about it, but I led our department in arrests and tickets for many years, and it was just running homeless people in and out of the jail. And I kept thinking I was going to make a difference, and it really wasn't. I joined law enforcement to make a difference in my community. And I think, I do believe being a law enforcement officer, you can do that. However, seeing that revolving door over and over again, I kept coming back to why I joined law enforcement, and was I really making a difference? And I feel like I wasn't. And so when an opportunity came up after about 6 or 7 years on the streets, called community policing. So you're still on the streets as an officer, but you're looking at the reasons and why crime exists and looking at proactive ways to address that. And it's not necessarily through arrests and tickets and building your stats up. It's about solving problems in the community, right? And working with the community from a community-based type policing, relationship-based policing. So obviously in the downtown area, mine was dealing with homeless population. And so I had to really humble myself and realize that, I wasn't going to rest my way out of homelessness. I'd already tried that. So we had to do something a little bit different. About that time in 2011, there was a new concept that was hitting nationwide called Police Homeless Outreach Teams, which focuses not on arrests and tickets, because we already proved that doesn't work, and it focuses on getting homeless off the streets and into housing. There was a study done by University of North Carolina, Charlotte, that shows if you get homeless people off the streets, it actually reduces their vagrancy arrests by 84%. So, from a law enforcement
Wow.
perspective, if that's our goal, why aren't we thinking outside the box and just trying to do something a little bit different? And so, that's really what kind of motivated me to try something different. Being in my community policing role, I was able to go get training in this new concept, the police homeless outreach team in another state. I brought it back, drafted our first camping ordinance, our SOP, and our policy and procedure, and we went live with 4 officers in 2013. So
The 84%, that's a big number when you're talking statistics.
yes,
That once, so you make one simple change, get them into housing,
and with
and it,
around services and stabilization.
sure, sure. So it's not just, yeah, throw you in a house, but let's get you set up. Let's deal with the root issue of housings, and then that can make a huge difference. So I'm curious. So you get this training. What was different about it? What did you learn, and how did policies start to change?
What I learned was 24 years ago when you went to the academy, one of the, I guess, philosophies was to treat everybody the same, right? No matter what, treat everybody the same. And it sounds great, but the reality is that's not necessarily the right practice because some people have mental health issues. You know, some people are low functioning. You have to learn to adapt and change with the people that you have,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, and also relationship building. It was back in the day, if you were on a scene and citizens would walk up, you'd say, "Hey, you need to go back inside and get away from our scene." It's a little bit different now. Maybe we're wanting to talk to people, knock on the doors around a crime scene, and talk to citizens, ask them what they saw, help them solve problems of crime. You know, the founders of policing is Sir Robert Peel, and one of the quotes he says, "The people are the public, the police are the public, and the public are the police," indicating we're all in this together, we're all the same. And so
Mm-hmm.
that kind of brought back this what I learned in that training. It was about building relationships not only with the community but also with their homeless population, building rapport. They don't trust anyone. They best definitely don't trust police and law enforcement. So if you're going to make a breakthrough, you got to show them respect and dignity because when you've lost your home and you've lost your job, you've lost your family, and you've lost everything, the only thing that you have left is your pride and dignity and respect. And if you try to take that away from somebody, it's not going to go well because that's the only thing they have. And so that really kind of opened my eyes about changing the way we look at homeless, the way we talk to them, the way we address them, and changing how we do business.
Man, here at Wired to Lead, and the work that Brave Restoration does is we talk a lot about how our brains are made to operate best. And what neuroscience has shown us is that our brains operate best when our core human needs are met first. And those human needs are belonging, acceptance of my humanity. A lot of times people say, "Do you see me? Do you know me? Do you care about me?" And I hear you saying, this is where the shift has happened. Instead of only caring about what you're doing, we're going to first care about you, who you are as an individual, and then that's going to lay the groundwork for maybe changing some of the behaviors. So I'm curious, so how do you go from someone who was tracking people down and taking them to jail to, because I assume they knew you because they had probably seen you around and been in your car on their way for a night.
Right, right.
How did you do that? How did you make that shift?
That's a very good question. And I learned that it took time because they're like, they see me and I was the homeless Gestapo, right? I led our department in arrests and tickets and it was all homeless. I was probably hated by the homeless community. So how do you make that change? Where now, if you ask, the homeless about my name, they know me and they say most 99% of the time, we're going to say a lot of good things about me. So, um,
Yeah,
the
he's
big
our guy.
thing, yeah. And so The big thing was showing them that we were willing to change and we were going to try something different. One of the things where when we first started the pilot program for our homeless outreach team is we went out and got endorsement letters, not only from the community and businesses, from the homeless providers. But one of the best endorsement letters I ever got was from a homeless shelter where I went to the homeless themselves in an evening and set up a PowerPoint and talked about this philosophy of police homeless outreach teams and trying to help them off the streets and into housing versus us just trying to cram them in the jail all the time. And it was a long meeting, and I had a lot of homeless complain about the way they were treated, and they get a ticket for walking across the street, but the businessman right next to him doesn't get one. So there was a lot of that, and I listened and I said, "Yeah, you're absolutely right." I said, "But I would like to change because everything you guys are saying is correct, and this is what I want to do, and this is the model, and here's what we're going to do." They were all in, and they accepted giving me a second chance. Now, so that was an endorsement letter, but then moving forward, at the end of the day, you still had a lot of the homeless that were on the streets. How do I convince them? One of the things I learned, especially when you're dealing with leadership, is go after the individuals that are leaders themselves. There was an individual who's chronically homeless in the community for 20 years. He was very charismatic and had a lot of following, and his name was Rooster. And so I knew if I was going to make this crazy idea of homeless outreach team working and get the trust of the homeless community, I had to go after the leader, and that was Rooster. And if I could help him, then I knew more were to follow. So I actually wrote a book about it called Rooster, What a Homeless Man Taught a Cop. It's at Watermark Books right now. If anyone's interested, I can give you a link later. But Rooster really, once I went out and helped him, got him turned around and got him into an apartment and started working with him, turned his life around. That was a domino effect. All of his friends immediately got into housing, and our phone was blowing up left and right. So it really was that quick, but it was understanding the leadership philosophy of trying to work with and strategize on those high profile individuals to make a difference first. And then in turn, they would help you.
Absolutely. It reminds me, I want to look back to my library back here. It reminds me of the book Influencer. And it's the same thing. You find the people who are your influencers, and you connect relationally, and then you start inviting them into a different way, and then before you know it, they're doing your job for you because they're
Right.
they're bringing everyone else along.
Right. Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so I'm curious, was there a turning point with Rooster that you thought, okay, I mean, was there resistance at the first, and then was there a turning point, or was he just like, okay, sure, help me?
And he was like, okay, sure, help me. Because I think what it was 20 years. So really how it started was the West Side officers, he would camp out and drink every day at parks in the West Side, like the Delano district area.
Mm-hmm.
And they would write him a ticket, take him to jail, and he'd get back out, go back to the park, start doing it again. I mean, they're not going to spend long time in jail for minor vagrancy type crimes. And they were sick of doing all this paperwork and seeing nothing happen. And so they said, Nate, what can you do? So when I went and contacted Rooster, I'm not going to arrest him. I said, look, how about I take you to inpatient treatment for substance abuse? It will get you off the streets, and it won't be cold because it was cold that day. And you'll get free food. And I want to talk to you about a housing program. And so I said, if you get in my car, I'll talk to you about the housing program. And so he gets in, he's drunk. And I said, Rooster, if we can get you clean and sober and get you into this housing program, and then you get a job, you do those three things, and I'll buy you a steak dinner. And from the back of the car, he's like, medium rare, all drunk and everything. And so,
Medium rare.
yeah. And I think it was, and no one had ever offered them to do that in 20 years. And here we are, the law enforcement. And I'm not knocking the community, the homeless providers or anything. I think it was just, we're first responders. We're there, and we can kick the can down the road, or we can try to do something different. And why not? And the 20 years of arresting him and taking him to jail wasn't working. And that one moment that I had with him, and he did 3 months of inpatient treatment. We were able to take him off the streets. He didn't go back to the streets. He went straight into a housing first department through the city of Wichita housing program, and then continued to work on his sobriety. Eventually, got a job and started working full time, and then living on his own. And we're still friends today. But again, it was about us trying something different and thinking outside the box. So, but luckily, he gave us that opportunity and that chance. I don't know how everything would have went if he didn't.
Yeah. There's a couple of things I want to circle back to. The first thing is that when you first started engaging this community, that before you were punishing them, so to speak, and now you're trying to partner with them, you're trying to connect, and that it started with going to them with curiosity and learning.
Yes.
Like you were learning. You
Yes.
weren't demanding that they learn something new, but you were learning. And not only did you learn, but you took responsibility for things that had been done incorrectly or
Right.
things that needed to change, like arresting a homeless person for walking across the street and not the business person.
Yeah. I mean, it takes a lot to humble yourself and look outside and think that maybe you don't have all the answers. And you got to be humble enough to be able to recognize that and ask for help. And maybe sometimes that help is coming from a homeless man. I mean, even with Rooster, I just met him. We're in the back of the car. I'm driving him, to the facility to get him help and then sign him up for housing. But I remember in the conversation, I said, Rooster, explained to me what, like 20 years of drinking and living on the streets homeless. I was like, why do you drink? Why do you do that? And he looks out the window and he says, I don't want to talk about it. So there was, hidden demons and issues. Eventually, through friendship and building that rapport, he opens up and explains why. Um, I mean, if you want to know the reasons why, you can read about it in my book. But it was about me trying to learn and not just assume things and think that I know why or whatever, because you don't know until you ask. And you have to be humble enough to open up and listen to people.
Yeah. The second thing I love about just your stories is learning that there's more to the picture than what we see. And yet, as first responders, especially, your job is to respond to what you see in the moment. So, like you said, I mean, there are systems that's their job to kind of triage. But then, if we really want transformation and change, we need to be willing to get under the surface to what we don't see. At Brave, it's why for those of you who are watching, you'll see the tree in the background of my video because it's my favorite picture because so often we think about growth as everything that's above ground. And yet, what drives growth or lack of is what's underground. So you're looking at Rooster and seeing what's above ground, why are you drinking? And very quickly, and it's okay to ask that if um, you're ready for what's underground. And he wasn't ready yet to share it. But there's always a story underneath an unwanted behavior. And if we simply try and transform it or change it by dealing with what's above ground, we're just going to end up cutting down a tree because it doesn't work. But if you start fertilizing or hearing and seeing and giving the tree what it needs from the root level, then all of a sudden you can change. If you start saying, oh, one of the reasons is because you're hurting. Well, to even be able to deal with what he was hurting with, we have to take care of the substance. So let's go figure out that. And then let's go a little deeper. And I imagine there was some sort of counseling or care for the hurts. Then there was, basic needs met. And then it became a domino effect for health instead of for regurgitating the same cycle.
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right, and I can talk about this because he talks about it publicly and even on videos he's
Mm,
been interviewed. But once we went through the addiction treatment, we started to find out that he did have some mental health issues that he had to deal with. And yeah, he's on medication, and he's okay saying that and admitting that he needed help. But it's exactly what you said. If I would have walked in had him get in the back of the car and go, "Hey, you're just a drunk, and you need to stop being lazy and work and stop doing that." I mean, come on, he's going to shut down. And
yeah.
you know, so
Or
we
go
had
buy
to,
another bottle of liquor, I mean, it's,
yeah. So we had to approach it from a different angle, with him, and eventually he found his way and found out I need help in other areas. And eventually, yeah, I need to talk about it. And we did.
yeah. The third thing I love about that story is, and you just kind of referred back to this idea that you didn't look at him as a homeless drunk, or you didn't interact with him as a homeless drunk person in the back of your car.
Right.
You interacted with him as a human who had a lot more potential and just needed some help.
Right.
And even your offering a steak dinner, it was a vote of confidence that, hey, what if you get clean, get into some housing, get a job, I'll gift you a steak dinner. That's projecting something different in the ahead of him. And my guess is he hadn't had very many people believe that he could be anything else.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And, it kind of reminds me of another story with our homeless. He was an individual. He was disabled. And he was in the day shelter. He wasn't into substance abuse. His name was Ernest. Ernest wasn't into substance abuse. He didn't have mental health issues. He was extremely intelligent. He just was disabled from his legs from years of doing taekwondo. He was a state champion. And he did construction. Well, he became disabled and crippled, and so he couldn't do construction, couldn't work. Next thing you know, he finds himself homeless, and he's in the shelter doing laundry. And I ended up meeting him, and we had a great friendship, and we did some projects together. And he was on some boards as a person with lived experience, because that's a lot of times required for some of the boards through HUD, the federal government.
Mhm.
And so that's really how I got to know him. Well, during this time period, I started talking with him. I said, Ernest, hey, you're extremely intelligent. You ever thought about going to college? And he just looked at me like I was crazy. I said, no, man, I'm serious. I was like, you're homeless, you're a minority, and you probably, there's lots of grants out there for you. You should look into it. And he just kind of blew me off and said no one in his family had ever done anything like that. Um, we continued to be friends. About 6 months later, but he was applying to get his disability for him being crippled, and he did get it. He moved out, got an apartment. I never see him again. 2 years later, I get a text message from him with a college degree, picture of a college degree from Wichita State University for IT. And he said, I wanted to show you this first, including my own family, because you were the only one that believed in me and no one ever did. And it meant a lot to me. And he ended up getting like a 4.0 GPA. And so that was pretty remarkable. And it taught me a lot about how strong having faith in someone is, like what you were just talking about, and saying, hey, I believe you can do this, especially coming from law enforcement. There's psychological studies out there to show this, and I didn't know any of this. I just saw it was happening and then did my own research and found out that law enforcement can have a positive effect, but also a negative effect on people through our words and our actions, because psychologically we are held to a higher standard, and we look like, what we say and what we do means a difference, whether it's negative or positive. And I really see it, especially in our homeless population, when we decide to be their cheerleader and tell them that they can do things. It makes a huge difference. Sometimes a lot more than even friends or family. And now that, Ernest really taught me that as well.
Yeah, neurologically, our brains, the subconscious part of our brain that drives all of our automatic responses, is driven or is created by our past experiences with other people. So many of us have negative experiences that help that then translate into these stories that we write, that I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not something. And those motivate us all through our lives. But what's so incredible, and this is the new science that's coming out, is it's this idea of memory reconsolidation. And I'm going to bring my brain out here. For those of you watching, I'm showing a graphic of my brain model. But in the middle of your brain, your subconscious, your limbic system is holding these stories, the neural networks that hold those experiential memories. Well, a lot of us have said, we're hardwired. Like, I'm just always going to be like this. It's who I am. Well, that's not scientifically true. We used to think if something happened to us and it was lodged in our subconscious, that you're just out of luck. You're going to have to spend the rest of your life coping. But what neuroscience is finding now is that experiences with people created those neural networks, and new experiences with new people can replace the felt experiential memory. So that's amazing. Even if you had a parent or a coach or a teacher who said, you're not smart enough, you're not big enough, you're not whatever enough. If you have somebody now, so for instance, a police officer, another teacher, a friend, anyone who starts to speak into your life in a different way, it can replace and rewrite, kind of rewire your brain. And so you've experienced that. Ernest is a living testament over the power of having someone believe in you.
Right. Yeah. Open my eyes up a lot. That's for sure.
Yeah. You know, out there right now, there's a lot of self help, believe in yourself, or give yourself grace, or love yourself. And you can do that, but only if someone else has believed in you first. You can reinforce memories that are in your brain, but you cannot create new experiences because they have to be an experience with another human.
Hmm.
It's how our brains are wired to be for connection. We are social creatures, and when we understand that, and when you are thinking about transformation and change, the more you can leverage experiences with trained people who are able to believe in you, to move toward, even if, there's a homeless person, a lot of people struggle. They're scared. They don't know what to do. They feel awkward, which is why I love the work that you do, because you guys are trained to be able to do that. And the more you do, the more you give experiences that can change their lives.
I was just gonna say, yeah, definitely. Like the topic that we're discussing right now is something when I'm training other law enforcement agencies. I spend an hour. We have an all day training on this, and I do spend a large amount of time talking about this topic and
Yeah.
the way we treat the homeless population. We need to be their cheerleaders, those type of
Mhm.
things. And I have to give examples to because it's probably something that's not normal for officers to act like because we're all supposed to treat everybody the same and this and that, right?
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
we got to sometimes get outside our box a little bit and do something a little bit different that maybe we're not trained to do or we're not used to or don't feel comfortable doing. But
Yeah.
it does work.
So I'm curious, have you faced resistance in this new way of being a policeman?
As far as being in the homeless outreach, police homeless outreach,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
resistance from like who?
Um, from communities, from leaders, from other officers.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say probably all the above. I mean, Community leaders, I think the good thing about like our city loves our homeless outreach teams. We get all the city council members are supportive of our mission and what we're doing and how we operate. Our chief actually started a homeless outreach team in Philadelphia, so he gets it,
Mm,
and he just I don't have to explain anything to him. He understands it
he
completely.
gets it.
He surprises me all the time about it, and so that's good. The officers, yes and no. So early on, when we first started our homeless outreach team, people were like, "What the heck is this? Like, why are we doing social work, or why do we have a team doing social work?" Right? So there was a lot, and they warned me about this during the training that there was a lot of we'd have to prove ourselves and get the,
Mhm.
the officers to understand how we can benefit them. One
Mm,
example I give is there was an officer, he had been on like 30 years, and he was a sniper for the SWAT team. And there was he wasn't on a call, with the SWAT team, but he was working patrol. And they kept getting like 3 or 4 calls of this homeless guy who's intoxicated, causing problems in the neighborhood, and trespassing, and businesses call him or whatever. And finally, he was on a call with a younger officer who had seen our presentation in the police academy and said,
mm,
"Hey, he's homeless. Why don't we call the homeless outreach team and see what they can do?" And the 30-year-old SWAT veteran was like, "Why are we calling that stupid? That's a bunch of social work. They can't help with this." And and then finally, after the third or fourth call, the officer said, "All right, go ahead and call the hot team." So the younger officer calls us. When I show up on scene, I had literally been working with that homeless person because I found out that there was a family member willing to take him in Oklahoma. And
mm,
through grants and donations from the community, we were going to pay for his bus ticket to reunite with a family member so he's no longer homeless, which means he wouldn't be causing problems here and he'd be in a stabilized home with someone looking over him in Oklahoma. And so when I arrived on scene, he says, "Nate," and he was in the middle of arguing with the officers, and he says, "Nate," I was like, "I've been trying to get a hold of you." I was like, "I've been looking for you too." He's like, "Can we go to the bus station? My family's ready to take me in." I said, "Absolutely." And he runs over and he jumps in the car and sits down, and I roll the window down and I said, "I got this, guys." He's like, "You won't have any more problems with them," and I drive off. That SWAT team member was blown away and was telling the other officer how amazing that was. And then the next day, he's calling me for help. The next day after that, he's calling me for help. And so it was just this, it took time, but it was this
mhm.
domino effect of officers realizing the benefits and what we do and how we proactively are helping reduce their 911 calls and helping them out. And if we're showing up and disregarding them on a call, they can go get lunch and we'll deal with the situation in a better
Mm,
way, right?
right.
And now it's gotten to the point where we're getting called all the time by officers. When we have calls holding with officers wanting us to come to their scene, and so it's had almost the opposite effect, which is great, right? But yeah,
Yeah.
it's time for us to build up the confidence for the officers, and so yeah, it's been great. It's always challenging. You're always going to have naysayers, and in the community, maybe people that are um, anti-police, or whatever.
Mhm.
And it doesn't matter what you do, you're never gonna make them happy. But
Yeah.
we've built up such a good reputation that is now that number is so small that we
Yeah.
have so much support from the community, from the officers, from our homeless population, from our elected officials now.
Yeah.
So that's great.
It's really exciting to be able to see real change happening.
Right. And that's not always the case. We've had leadership in the past. They don't work on the department that didn't support our mission, and we're
Mm,
trying to make changes, that weren't conducive to our mission. Um, and then sometimes you have politicians that maybe disagree on directions or whatever. But
mhm.
right now, in general, yeah, it's great, and it's good to have. But it can be tough for other cities and other agencies when they first start out. They have to go through those growing pains. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what your consulting business is. How I assume that you are connected to other police forces yeah, tell us how and what, how you get to partner with other cities.
I do a little bit of two things. First I started off mostly implementing and starting homeless outreach teams in other cities. One example was Salt Lake City, um,
Mm.
Lubbock, Texas, and a few others, many others. And then as police homeless outreach teams became popular across the nation, pretty much every police department has a homeless outreach team now. If you don't have
Okay.
one, you're old school and you're behind the times. You need to retire and move on. So now I've actually moved into more consulting and taking police homeless outreach teams and making them better and improving upon them. And that's where I've gotten a lot of federal grants from
Mm.
the Department of Justice, IECP, to train other cities or improve their homeless outreach teams that they do have. The other thing I started to dive into, which kind of we've already talked about, was that community-based policing, relationship
Mm.
building, relationship-based policing model. And what it's actually called, it is data-driven. It is science-based.
Mm.
Through it's called, I call it proactive alliance. And I'll kind of get on my probably a little bit of soapbox on what that is. Yeah. It is data driven. It's backed up by Rutgers University. There's actually certificates on that. It's going to sound a little bit like community policing, which community policing is good, but that's more of a philosophy. And I do
Mm.
believe in community policing, but it takes community policing on a macro level and kind of makes it more of a micro level. So, yes, you do community policing and get the community in general to trust you. But at the end of the day, if you need specific people to help you out, who can you call for? That's where it gets down a little bit more on its core towards what's called proactive alliance, building those alliances. It's basically a policing approach that integrates law enforcement methods and concepts with counseling and psychology to help
Mm.
officers build lasting collaborative relationships within the community. It was actually developed and licensed by professional counselor Molly Mastoris. They're out of Arlington, Virginia. Her husband worked for the Arlington Police Department. But it's a
Mhm.
prevention model designed to provide officers with techniques to build rapport first before a
Mm.
crisis occurs. The core of proactive alliance is that relationship-based policing, um, basically defined as establishing relationships within the community members and collaboratively solve complex issues. The approach just aims to shift policing from like an enforcement first model to a culture where dialogue and mutual understanding can create a foundation of order and scrutiny or security, allowing officers and the public to work together for a shared goal. And that's kind of, I guess, a quick background of it. But again, it is science based. There is training modules for it,
Mm.
which is a little bit different than community policing because there isn't really a training certification for community policing like CIT, Crisis Intervention Team, or some of these other concepts that this is. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, teach that plus obviously the implementation of homeless outreach team and helping cities that have homeless related issues and how law enforcement can partner. Law enforcement shouldn't be the go-to for addressing homelessness. They also shouldn't be completely wiped out of it either. It's a
Right.
balance. And I look at the way I described it. I was at a conference for IACP, International Association Chief of Police, and someone asked
Mm.
that question. Well, should law enforcement take the lead on this? And I said, no, not really. I think we're just look at a wheel and a bunch of spokes. We're one spoke of the wheel to make it turn. And if you take one of those spokes out, whether it's the business community, whether it's faith based, whether it's the homeless providers, and then the wheel doesn't turn as well, right? And
Yeah.
we have to have all those spokes together to make it move forward.
Yeah. I love that because it's a community issue
Right,
and it's something that needs the community participation. And if we try and put it on one entity, it's just not going to work because it's not a black and white issue. There, it's not so singular that there's one reason or one way to get out. I mean, it's so nuanced. So I think that holistic approach just makes sense.
right, absolutely. And we, as law enforcement, if we're going to address homelessness and help people get into housing, okay, who's going to work with us if we have this standoff approach like this? And right, or we're just going to arrest all the homeless people. You're not going to get the housing department to give you housing vouchers. You're not going to get the substance abuse treatment centers to work with you and open up beds dedicated for your hot team, which, by the way, did happen, but it was
Mm.
because of relationship building. Rooster, uh, there was no beds available, But when they realized that I was going to help them get into housing, their director came to me and said, Nate, we're going to open up a single bed dedicated to the hot team, not other officers, only the hot team, because you're helping our clients and we want to help you. So it was that
Wow.
relationship of back and you scratch my back, I scratch yours, right?
Yeah.
That would have never happened if we weren't building those relationships up. So the reason why our team is successful, it wasn't because I had this cool idea or I'm this great cop. It really isn't. It was about understanding that I need help. And the only way to do that is to build those relationships and work together with the community. That is why we were successful. I won Officer of the Year award for implementing our team. But when I went and accepted my award, I stood up there and I spent 20 minutes talking about all the partners that actually helped me win this award. And it was really helping me and us working together.
Wow. We need another round of podcasts because there's still a whole lot more to talk about, but we are almost out of time. And so I want to give you some time to speak to our listeners. And if you could ask communities of people to do one thing to be a part of this issue, how would you invite them into this journey?
I think the main thing that I want them to understand is, yes, you nailed it. It's a community issue. It's all of us working together. And maybe you don't have the time to get involved to go volunteer. Maybe you have financial ways to help and do not give the money to their homeless population because studies have shown that goes towards their addictions. Give it to those agencies that are working to help the homeless in the right way. And you choose that. Get involved and donate your time if you can do that. But the number one thing is understand that the dynamics of homelessness and the reasons why people get into become homeless are very vast. It's mental health, it's substance abuse issues, it's getting disabled like Ernest. It's all over the place. And the reasons why people get out of homelessness and the way they do it is going to be different as well. So understanding that and put away your biases and understand that anyone can be homeless at any time. And when I say that sounds cliche-ish, but in my book, I talk about a police officer who became disabled and became homeless in Wichita and his story. And, I challenge people to read that. And I talk about that individual. He's Deputy Javier Mong. I can say his name. I tell that story the very first time when I start talking with law enforcement to get their attention. They say, this is real. This could happen to anybody at any time, for any moment. And that's kind of probably what I want to tell people. Put down your biases and understand that this is a community issue. It's not for law enforcement or government only. Should we be involved? Yes, but it's the whole community.
Yeah. Bottom line is it's a human issue.
Yes.
And when we can continue to see one another as human, and sometimes our humanity, we get into situations that we don't have the support we need, and we just need someone to connect to us, someone to see us and to care. And if we can all do that, it's hard to imagine that it wouldn't move us to a better place.
Absolutely. Nailed it.
Well, Nate, thank you so much for being here. We will get links to your book in the show notes, as well as your consulting agency. And just thanks again for sharing. And we will look forward to the next conversation. Thanks for listening to Wired to Lead. If this helped you lead with more clarity today, hit follow in your app so you never miss an episode, and leave a short review in Apple Podcasts. 2 sentences is perfect, and it helps leaders like you to find us. If you're a leader who would like to explore opportunities for workshops or coaching with Brave Restoration, please reach out to our website at www.braverestoration.org. We would love to hear from you. See you next time.